It was raining on Thanksgiving. The hard rain, November Ohio rain that hits the ground like it has a grudge, the kind that comes sideways and finds the gap between your collar and your neck, and settles there cold and deliberate, like it knows exactly where you are least protected. I was standing inside my son's house, the house I paid for, but we will get to that, watching the Thanksgiving preparations the way you watch something that used to include you and does not anymore. The turkey was in the oven. The cranberry sauce was in a crystal bowl I had given them as a wedding gift 4 years ago, and that Jessica had told her friends she bought in Paris. The house smelled the way Thanksgiving is supposed to smell. Warm, layered, the particular combination that fills a kitchen and makes everyone inside it feel like they belong there. Everyone except me. There were voices in the dining room, laughter, the particular bright performative laughter of people being entertained by my daughter-in-law Jessica, whose primary skill was presentation. Not cooking, she had hired a caterer for the sides and ordered the turkey pre-brined from a gourmet service that charged $400 for a bird my mother would have brined herself for the cost of salt and water. Not homemaking, the house was maintained by a cleaning service that cost $1,800 a month, paid for by the credit card in Jessica's wallet, which was funded by the account that I funded. Jessica's skill was looking expensive. She moved through rooms with the particular awareness that every person was watching, and that the watching was the point. She came into the kitchen wearing a $1,200 cashmere sweater. I knew the price because the credit card statement came to my accountant every month, and he flagged anything over $1,000. The sweater had been flagged on October 14th, alongside $800 boots and a $2,200 handbag and a $600 spa treatment, $4,800 on a Tuesday in October. From my account, she was carrying a paper plate. White. Flimsy, the kind you buy in a stack of 50 for $3. She had put food on it, some turkey, a spoonful of mashed potatoes, a token gesture of cranberry sauce. Not a meal, a concession. She held it out to me. She said, "Mom, eat in the garage today. Our high society guests are arriving, and your old-fashioned clothes are embarrassing." My son Marcus was in the hallway. He heard. I know because his jaw tightened the way his father's jaw used to tighten when something wanted to come out. His father would have let it out. His father would have said, "Jessica, if you ever hand my mother a paper plate again, I will hand you a suitcase." Marcus was not his father. Marcus looked at me. He looked at the floor. He said nothing. I looked at the paper plate. I said, "All right, dear." I picked up my coat, the good wool one, 20 years old. Well maintained, like everything I maintained, like the trust, like the accounts, like the $15,000 monthly credit allowance currently being used to purchase cashmere sweaters and spa treatments, and the expensive performance of a life Jessica believed was hers, but that was actually mine. I walked past Jessica, past my son, through the front door into the rain. I walked to my car. I got in. I sat there, rain on the windshield. I did not cry. I had done my crying years ago, when Robert died, when the trust was established, when I first understood what Jessica was. What was left after the crying was clarity. The particular sharp vision that arrives when tears have washed everything else away, and what remains is simple truth, and the simplicity allows you to act. I picked up my phone. I called the bank. Not the regular number, the VIP executive line, the direct number I had been given when Robert's trust was established. It connected me to David Harrington, senior private wealth manager at First National, who answered on Thanksgiving because when your client's trust generates what mine generates, you answer on Thanksgiving. He said, "Helen, happy Thanksgiving." I said, "David, I need you to freeze the primary black card on Marcus's account immediately and reverse the last 3 luxury transactions made today." He was quiet for a moment. I heard typing. He said the last 3 transactions are a catering service for $2,200, a wine delivery for $1,400, and an online jewelry purchase at 2:17 this afternoon, $8,000. A diamond cocktail ring, $8,000. For a ring, on Thanksgiving Day, while telling me to eat in the garage, I said freeze the card, reverse all 3, and flag the account for unauthorized usage review. He said the flag will trigger an automated fraud alert to the cardholder's phone. I said, "Good." He said, "Helen, are you sure?" I said, "David." She handed me a paper plate and told me to eat in the garage. In the house I pay for. While wearing a sweater I pay for. I have been sure for 3 years. I just did not have the paper plate until today. Now I have it, and it is enough. He processed it. Card frozen within 15 minutes. Reversals within 30. Fraud alert within the hour. I hung up. I sat in the rain and looked at the house, the $2 million house. The house my son and his wife believed they owned. They did not own it. The trust owned it. Robert's Trust. Established with proceeds from 34 years of building a medical supply company from a garage, a real garage with a concrete floor and fluorescent lights, where Robert packed boxes himself for 3 years and where I packed boxes beside him, because that is what wives did in 1986 when their husbands started businesses. The trust had purchased the house 4 years ago when Marcus said, "Mom, we found our dream home." Robert's attorney, William Chen, had advised me not to gift it outright. He had met Jessica once and assessed her in 45 seconds. He said, "Helen, lease the house. Include a morality clause." The morality clause, an emergency moral clause, provided for immediate lease termination if the occupants engaged in conduct deliberately humiliating or abusive toward the trust's primary beneficiary. Me. Marcus signed the lease. Jessica signed the lease. Jessica did not read the clause because Jessica did not read documents. She signed things the way she did everything, with confidence, without attention. The details were my job. The details had always been my job, and the details were about to arrive at the dining room table. I waited 47 minutes. The transactions needed to reverse. The card needed to freeze. The fraud alert needed to arrive on Jessica's phone while the guests were there, while the performance was at its peak. I learned later what happened inside during those 47 minutes. Jessica had been showing friends the diamond ring she ordered, pulled it up on her phone, performing the expensive carelessness of a woman who buys an $8,000 ring like a cup of coffee. Then her phone buzzed. The fraud alert. "Your accounts have been flagged for unauthorized usage. Fraud investigation initiated." She smiled at her friends. Technical glitch. She pulled out the backup card, tried to order $500 of wine from a delivery service, the kind that comes in a wooden box with tissue paper. Declined. Tried again. Declined. Her friends were watching. Country club friends, foundation board members, high society guests, all watching Jessica swipe a card that would not work, while the entire financial architecture she had been living inside for 4 years was being shut off by the woman she sent to the garage. Marcus called me. I did not answer. Jessica called me. I did not answer. I called William Chen. He said, "Helen." I said, "William, it is time. Bring the file." He arrived in 20 minutes. Sensible sedan, coat, leather briefcase. He looked exactly like what he was, a man with documents. We walked to the front door. I did not knock. I opened it with my key, the key to my house. The dining room was visible from the foyer. 11 guests around the table. Jessica at the head, Marcus beside her, every face turning toward the front door. The room went silent, the particular silence that enters when a woman walks in with a lawyer. Jessica stood up, holding her phone that had been buzzing with fraud alerts for 30 minutes. She said, "Ruth, what are you doing here? Who is this?" I said, "Jessica. This is William Chen, my attorney, also the attorney for the trust that funds the credit card that just stopped working in front of your guests." 11 faces recalculating. Jessica said you had our cards blocked. I said I froze my cards. The cards funded by my trust. The cards I pay $15,000 a month to maintain. The cards you use today to order $2,200 of catering and $1,400 of wine and an $8,000 diamond ring while telling me to eat in the garage. I looked at the guests. I said, "Forgive me for interrupting. I want to introduce myself properly since I was not given the chance. My name is Ruth Calloway. I am Marcus's mother. I am the primary beneficiary of the Calloway Family Trust established by my late husband Robert. The trust funds the lease on this house, the credit accounts, the monthly $15,000 allowance supporting this household for 4 years. I was invited to Thanksgiving today. At 4:30, my daughter-in-law handed me a paper plate and told me to eat in the garage because my clothes were embarrassing. 11 faces doing moral mathematics. William opened his briefcase, set a folder on the table, beside the crystal bowl. He said, "This is a notice of lease termination pursuant to the emergency moral clause in Section 14 of the residential lease agreement signed by both Marcus and Jessica Calloway 4 years ago. The clause provides for immediate termination if the occupants engage in conduct deliberately humiliating toward the trust's primary beneficiary. Handing the beneficiary a paper plate and directing her to eat in the garage constitutes such conduct. The lease is terminated effective immediately." Jessica said, "What moral clause?" I said the one you signed without reading Jessica. The one that says if you humiliate the woman paying for everything, you lose everything. William continued. He said additionally, the accumulated credit expenditures over the past 6 months, $90,412, have been reclassified as an unauthorized personal loan. Mrs. Calloway is requesting repayment within 180 days. He set the repayment notice on the table. Jessica said you cannot do this. I said I have already done it. The guests began leaving, the particular staggered departure of people extracting themselves from discomfort. One couple, then another, then 3 more. Within 12 minutes, the dining room was empty except for the 4 of us. The table was still full of cold food. The crystal bowl, 11 empty chairs, the abandoned abundance of a Thanksgiving designed to impress, and now witnessed by no one. Jessica sat down. Not at the head, in a side chair, the particular collapse of a woman whose performance has ended. Marcus spoke for the first time. He said, "Mom, I am sorry." I said, "Marcus, you are sorry now. You were silent at 4:30 when your wife handed your mother a paper plate. You have been silent for 4 years, while she spent $90,000 of your father's money on cashmere and diamond rings and the performance of a life funded entirely by the woman she treats like an inconvenience. I said your father packed boxes in a garage, Marcus. A real garage. Fluorescent lights and concrete. He packed them with his hands. I packed beside him. For 3 years. That is where the money came from. Your wife sent me to a garage tonight, a different kind, the kind where you put things you are ashamed of. I walked to the garage door, opened it. Inside I had placed 2 mattresses. Old ones from the storage unit, functional, clean, not the memory foam king upstairs, the kind that are adequate for sleeping, and not the sort of thing a woman who buys $8,000 rings would choose. I said there are 2 mattresses in the garage. You are welcome to sleep on them tonight. Since the lease is terminated, I thought you might want to start getting comfortable with more modest accommodations. I looked at Jessica. I said, you told me the garage was heated. You should be comfortable. Jessica said, you cannot be serious. I said, Jessica, I am 71 years old. I was serious when I packed boxes at 2 in the morning with my husband. I was serious when I built a trust that funded your lifestyle. I was serious when I sat in my car in the rain and called the bank while you tried to buy an $8,000 ring with my money. And I am serious now. The garage is where you put things that do not fit the image. That is what you told me. So I have put something in the garage that fits your new image, which is 2 people who spent 4 years beyond their means on someone else's money and who are going to learn what their actual means look like. Marcus sat on the stairs. He said, Mom, I should have said something. When she handed you the plate, I should have said my mother eats at this table, or nobody eats at this table. I said yes, Marcus. Your father would have. Jessica said, Ruth, if I apologize, if I say I am sorry, can we? I said, Jessica, I am going to tell you something my husband Robert told me the first Thanksgiving after his business succeeded. He was setting the table, and he stopped and pointed at the head and said, Ruth, no matter how big this table gets, no matter how much money is in the account, your mother sits here first. Then everyone else arranges themselves around her, because she is the reason any of us are sitting anywhere. I said Robert understood that a family is arranged around the mother, and the mother sits at the table, not in the garage. I picked up my purse, put on my coat. I said one more thing. The paper plate, I am taking it with me. I am going to keep it on my kitchen counter where I can see it every morning. And every morning it will remind me of two things: that I made the right decision tonight, and that a woman who packs boxes in a garage at 2 in the morning builds something. A woman who hands paper plates to her mother-in-law builds nothing. I picked up the paper plate. I walked to the front door. I stopped. I looked back at the dining room, the cold turkey, the crystal bowl, the 11 empty chairs, my son on the stairs, Jessica standing between the table and the garage. Between the life she performed and the life that was actually hers. I said, "Happy Thanksgiving." I walked out. The rain had stopped. The sky had cleared the way Ohio skies clear after a storm. Stars visible. Everything washed. I drove home. To my house on Birchwood Lane. The house where Robert and I had packed boxes. Where I had cooked Thanksgiving dinner for 30 years before the holidays moved to the mansion and the paper plates and the garages. I went inside. I made tea, strong. I sat at my kitchen table. The farmhouse table Robert found at a salvage yard our first year of marriage, refinished by my hands. 31 years in this kitchen. I set the paper plate on the counter. Then I made myself a real plate. The good china, Robert's mother's china. Leftover roast chicken, mashed potatoes I had made myself, cranberry sauce from my mother's recipe, a warm roll. I sat at the head of the table, where Robert used to point and say, "Your mother sits here first." I ate. Simple food, not catered, not $400, made by my hands, on my plate, at my table. The best Thanksgiving meal I had ever eaten. The phone rang at 10:30. Marcus. I did not answer. 11. Jessica. Did not answer. Midnight. Marcus again. I turned the phone off. I washed my plate, dried it, put it back with the good china, left the paper plate on the counter, went to bed, slept well. The best sleep in 4 years. What I want to say to every woman watching today is something Robert told me in a garage with fluorescent lights and packing tape at 2 in the morning when we had nothing except each other. He said, "Ruth, someday we are going to have a big table, and the people sitting at it are going to forget it started here. In this garage, with these boxes, they are going to see the table and forget the garage underneath it." He said, "When that happens, Ruth, when someone forgets where it came from, you remind them, not by yelling, by being there, by being real, by being the floor everything was built on," he said. "And if they ever try to send you back to the garage, if they hand you a paper plate and tell you to eat where you started, you look at them and remind them that the garage is where the building happened. And the people who do the building sit at the head of the table, always, no matter how big the table gets. If someone has ever handed you a paper plate, if someone has told you to eat in the garage, if someone has looked at your clothes and decided you were an embarrassment, you are not an embarrassment. You are the garage, the concrete floor, the fluorescent lights, the 2 in the morning, the packing tape, the boxes, the particular fierce, beautiful, stubborn refusal to stop building even when nobody sees. You are the foundation. And the foundation does not eat in the garage. The foundation sits at the head of the table, always. Tell me in the comments, has someone ever handed you a paper plate? Has someone told you that you did not belong at a table you built? Has someone looked at the woman who funded their life and decided she was an embarrassment? Tell me what you did. Because I think there are women watching today, standing in kitchens being told they do not fit the image, being told their clothes are wrong and their presence is inconvenient. You are not inconvenient. You are the reason there is a table. Sit at it, where your mother sat, and where you belong.